Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast, where we explore your hidden thoughts and desires, revealing your greatest drop the mic moments. Now, here's your host, Art Costello.
Welcome to the Shower Epiphanies podcast. Today, I am honored to have Megan Fenyoe. Megan is an Air Force veteran, a licensed clinical mental health therapist, speaker and a trainer, host of Blonde Bombshell podcast and I Am Enough TV, and founder of the international I Am Enough movement. Megan is an amazing person. She has got a great story. I want her to tell us her story. So Megan, go ahead and start out with telling us your story.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. I love being on podcasts with fellow veterans. So it's an honor to be on the show with you. So my story, has all of its ups and downs and struggles and craziness. I grew up in a very dysfunctional home, and I have a learning disability, actually an 8th grade reading level and an 8th grade math level. And my guidance counselor in high school told me and my parents that I should never go to college because I was never going to graduate. And at that moment, I think I had started, really creating that I'm not good enough mindset. But in that moment, just being in high school, that was kind of where I really started working on the process of dealing with maybe not being good enough, but also saying, watch what I'm going to do. And, school is very, very difficult for me. But here I am today. I have my master's. I'm a licensed mental health therapist, both in Michigan and California. Have been doing that for about 15 years. So although I still struggle with, reading and comprehension, it wasn't until I got into social work and therapy where I really thrived and didn't have, a lot of issues with doing well, in school. I still had like a computer that scanned all my reading and all of that stuff. But, I've been very, very blessed career-wise. I started working for the state of Michigan when I was 23, and everything has been government related except, once I got out of the military. So I made this crazy decision when I was 33 years old to commission as an officer in the Air Force. And so I was stationed. I moved from Michigan. That's where I lived for 33 years, and got stationed at Travis Air Force Base here in California and provided mental health and substance abuse treatment to active duty members. So I had already been a therapist for 10 years and working for the government. So it was kind of a crazy decision. I kind of did it backwards, where I got all my student loans and then went into the military, and I can't use my GI Bill to pay off my student loans, but whatever, it was good. And I really had a lot of struggles in being active duty and being a therapist. It was difficult to be a therapist and creating that, client-patient relationship or client-therapist relationship, because there's so many people involved in active duty members' life, like commanders and first sergeants, and, that confidentiality isn't really there. And I struggled and also struggled and maybe I'm not a good therapist, maybe I'm not good enough, because it was really more about the ranks, I felt, than it was about our patients. So I did leave the service after 3 years, still miss wearing the uniform, but I just felt, ethically, I wasn't able to do the good work that I wanted to. So in that time, I also met my now ex-husband, which I was definitely not planning on. I was not moving across, the country to meet a husband, but, that was a whirlwind of a relationship. And we met and were married within 11 months. So I was 34 at the time. And there were a lot of red flags that I saw in the relationship, but I just ignored it. And I think a lot of people are really surprised when they hear that I'm a therapist, and ignored all of these flags and ended up being in a very narcissistic, abusive marriage. And I did not even know that at the time. So kind of fast forward, there's so much in the years of 2013, February of 2018. But in that time, so I was involved with that. He had an affair for 14 months of our 2.5-year marriage. He kicked me out of our house twice. He filed for divorce and pulled the papers 4 times. And the divorce, he finally went through with the divorce because I was so traumatized and had created that story in my mind that I wasn't good enough. And if I just did this or I just did that, that I would make this marriage work. And of course, everything was my fault. You know, the gaslighting, the discarding, like everything was my fault. He literally made me feel like I was crazy, that I had all of the issues. So I was literally broken, traumatized, but even at that point, still did not know what was really going on in the realm of the abuse that I was in. So after the divorce, I still remained committed to him for 2 years. I ended up moving to San Diego. I was living in Northern California and made the decision to move to San Diego 2 years ago, thinking that, you know, maybe he would miss me, or maybe I just needed to move. At that point, I didn't know. But I had taken a job transfer because I was working at a hospital up there, and it just worked to transfer down here. 5 months after I transferred down here, I lost my job as a therapist, which was unbelievable because A, I'm a veteran, and B, I had been a therapist for almost 13 years at that point. But I have to say that I was fired not because of some crazy illegal thing, but I had done a Facebook Live on whole food nutrition and the power of healthy eating when it comes to our mindset and emotional and physical pain. And I did it in my office, but it was like a blank wall, and nowhere on my Facebook did it say I worked at this hospital, and they fired me. And I was still on probation, so whatever. But I lost my 6-figure income. You know, I was 39 at the time, had no idea what I was doing. And I was still talking to my ex-husband. 4 months later, so this is now February 2018, my ex-husband says, I'm coming down to San Diego because I have a job offer. I'm going to interview. And if I get it, I'm going to prove to you that I made the biggest mistake of my life. Now, mind you, he said that for 2 years after the divorce. You know, we would go on dates. I never went back to our home after the divorce. But he would come over, you know, he would cry. He cried the day that I moved to San Diego and begged me not to go, blah, blah, blah.
He's a narcissist.
Yeah. Oh, wait, it gets better. Let me tell you. So I remember when I picked him up and I said a prayer and I said, okay, Lord, if this is not meant to be, you need to show me. The divorce wasn't enough for me to leave. The affair wasn't enough. If you show me, I will follow you. Because at that point, I had gotten to the point where I was hiding from my friends that I was still talking to him. And it was like, he was like my drug. Like the minute he would discard me, I would get into this manic mode of like needing him in my life. Right. And I couldn't survive. Like he was my drug. And on the outside, I looked like I had it all together, but I was dying, even like living in San Diego and losing my job 4 months before that. And then February 15th of 2018, literally 24 hours after I prayed that prayer, I found out that he had actually moved in another girl, not the girl that he had an affair with, a month before our divorce was final, bought her a brand new vehicle, and she had been living in our house for 2 years, and I did not even know she existed. So he had 2 relationships going on, and I was just like, what? Like, it was like that Band-Aid. You know, because when the affair happened and the divorce, even though I'm a therapist, I should have gotten therapy, but I'm like, oh no, I'm good. I'm just going to open my private practice and work like 60 hours a week and work at the hospital and just put on this face. But, you know, for so many years, I was just living this mediocre life and wanting more in my life, but didn't know what that was. So February 15th, 2018, I said goodbye to him. It was not like nice. It was like very dramatic, but like walked away from him and actually started writing my best-selling book. And at that moment when I wrote, there's a chapter called Mr. N, which goes into more detail about my trauma and a lot more information about what narcissistic abuse is. It wasn't until I started writing that chapter did I realize that I was in a narcissistic abusive relationship. And that had been a total of, so he was in my life for 6 years. The marriage, and then after the marriage. So
could I ask a question?
Crazy. Yeah, of course.
Was he a pilot by any chance?
No. He was active duty, but he was not a pilot.
I've just had some experience with a narcissistic pilot. So
yeah. No, he was not a pilot.
They have the Tom Cruise syndrome.
Yeah. They do. Yes, they do. But no, so everything. I mean, that Band-Aid was ripped off. And let me tell you, I had lost my job. He was out of my life. I literally was holding my life and my heart in my hands. And it was like quicksand. I was like, what am I going to do? And so I started writing the book. At that time, I could have gone back and gotten a full-time job and made a lot of money. But I also had this nudging feeling, A, which was to walk away from him, and B, to do something more with my life. So I took this crazy leap of faith. So it's been a year and a half, jumped into entrepreneurship. So I'm a contract therapist and work at like a chronic pain facility, like 14 hours a week. And then the rest of the time I'm a therapist and I do video therapy. So right in my house. And then I also, I'm a speaker at my show and my podcast and all of that. So I'm not making as much money as I did, but I'm happy. Like I have full control of my life. And once I walked away from him, I got back into my own therapy and really started doing my trauma work. I had done trauma work in my 20s, but had to dive deep again into all of this. And I think the biggest thing that I learned, so that's where the whole I'm not good enough mindset came by. I was like, not that I wasn't good enough for him, but it made me think I wasn't a good therapist, a good friend, a good daughter, sister. It encompassed every part of my life. And he never told me that I wasn't good enough, right? But I created that story in my head based on his actions and his behaviors. So the big thing for me in my trauma work was to release that trauma and to find closure. But the closure was not going to come from him, right? Narcissistic abuse. Like you're not going to get that closure from him. So it was huge for me because what I had to do was find the closure of the person I became when I was with him. And the minute I found that realization and really turned inward, right? Inward on me and not looking to him to make it better, that is where everything changed. And it's been a crazy journey in the last year and a half. Became a best-selling author, speak all over the country, podcast show, my movement. It's just been incredible, most traumatic time, but also most incredible because I finally can say that I am good enough and I know what that means. And I still struggle sometimes, because I'm still human. Like there'll be a day where I feel like that I'm not good enough, but it doesn't affect every part of me, right? And it's just a quick thought and then it leaves my mind. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. Financial struggles, had to file for bankruptcy, all of that stuff. But yeah, that's it.
The need to have closure in any given situation is sheer human nature. And when it comes to romantic relationships, this desire skyrockets. Has your previously failed relationship left you in immense pain? It's not uncommon for people to shy away from a new relationship after their first one fails miserably. The fear of the unknown makes them hide in a shell to prevent any future heartbreak. Relatable? Despite wanting to love and be loved, you can't take the plunge if your mind and heart are still locked somewhere in the past. Maybe you aren't aware of the power of releasing the past, or perhaps you don't know how to do it. Art Costello in his online course teaches the art of moving on from bad places to happier, more stable ones. This course can change your life for good, helping you beat all kinds of negativity on the road to eternal bliss. Sign up now before the gloominess gets the better of you at expectationacademy.com.
It's quite a journey, and I want to add some things to it because the audience can't see you. And, I know I deal with a lot of my clients that are women who don't feel they're good enough because they're not pretty enough and all of that. Well, you definitely don't fit that mold. I mean, you're blue-eyed blonde that is very, very attractive. I would have never, ever thought that you've been in practice 15 years. You don't look as old as you are.
Thank you.
And, that narcissism and not feeling good enough, narcissists actually actively seek out people who don't feel that they're good enough because they feel that they can gain control and do that. We've done a lot of narcissism work on my show. I had Dr. Bindu Babu from New York, who has been in actually 2 narcissistic relationships, and she has had great insights, and have actually been some of my best shows that, as far as people watching. So, but I wanted to ask you something about when you were young and you were struggling and you were not feeling like you were enough. We tend to live up to that label that we are branded with as a child. We did some research with prisoners, and we found out some stunning information with prisoners that almost 89% of them, whether they were male, female, juvenile, or adult, were told as a child they were going to end up in jail. I mean, it's amazing how we live up to those labels that people. So when you were labeled, I'm not good enough, by a school counselor. I mean, I went through the same struggles you did. I came from a very small town in upstate New York where my family was pretty much shunned because we didn't fit into the mold of everybody else. And I was told I'd never amount to a hill of beans. Do you think that you being told, I think we look at it through two lenses. Either we let it defeat us or we let it be our greatest challenge in our lives. Because I know I've worked hard all my life to prove them people back there that I am good enough and that I am capable and that I was not stupid and I was not all the things. I mean, it went as far as where I couldn't play any sports, and I'm very athletic. I played minor league baseball for the Dodger organization.
Wow, nice.
I've gone out of my way to prove. Do you think that affected you where you've gone out of your way to be better? And, sometimes it takes us a long cycle to get there. I mean, and my audience has heard this before. I just turned 72 and I've come full circle in understanding all of my childhood and all that. And it's taken a long time. And when I was 63 and lost my wife to cancer is when I really started doing the introspective work. And I'd been a counselor and all that stuff, but it just never clicked the way it did once I went through some traumatic, trying times. And I think sometimes the trying times really help us become, or is the catalyst for us to becoming stronger, bigger, better, and believing that we are enough. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I think, to go back to something that you said first before I answer that question, when you had commented about what I look like and this and that, it just shows that so many of us, and I talk about not being good enough, whether it be career, relationships, health issues, right? Because every single one of us have or currently struggle with that thought. We've all thought that, right? And it just shows the narcissistic abuse. It's not one of those abuses that you have physical marks from, right? And you can go around and act like you have it all together and this and that, but still be dying inside. And I think that that's, really important to put out there, because I was that person. And to go back, like I said, no one has ever said those words to me. You're not good enough, right? My guidance counselor said, oh, you should never go to college. You should go to cosmetology school because you probably won't graduate. You won't graduate. So instead of saying, oh, he thinks I'm not going to graduate, I created that phrase, I'm not good enough, right? So that's the difference in my story, is that no one told me that. And so for me, I wanted to prove that I could do it. I wanted to prove to myself. And because ever since I was little, I just had this nudging feeling of wanting to help people and do something bigger with my life, to always give back and go above and beyond for people. And so I think that was my driving force. But I think I wasn't as involved in my mind at that point, I think, than I was in my early 30s and all of that stuff. I kind of was just, I was working full time, for the government and getting my master's full time all at the same time. So it was just kind of go, 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 go,
Has anyone ever inspired you to discover a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled you? It is a magical experience, isn't it? Inspiration is indeed very powerful, yet it's often undermined. It can lift you from the ground to the sky in no time. Have you ever thought about returning the favor by inspiring the people around you? If you don't think you have it in you, we have good news for you. Art Costello's online course has everything you need to learn to supercharge yourself and shape your character into a powerful personality. Get ready to discover your strengths and unleash the creativity within. Don't believe it? Check it out yourself by signing up for this life-changing course at expectationacademy.com. That's expectationacademy.com.
Do you think you've always had the expectation that you were good enough, though? Do you think that that was in your mind?
That I wasn't good enough?
No, that you were good enough. My area of expertise is expectations, and I often identify in people that we look at our expectations through two lenses, either faith or fear.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't any gray in between it. When it's in your mind and in your subconscious, it's either faith or fear. It either stops us or it starts us. I usually try to identify in somebody's subconscious or even their conscious mind the expectation that, that they are good enough, that they are capable, because that's what I did when I was young. I can remember vividly saying to myself, I was going to use a cuss word, but I don't cuss. So I was going to, tell these people, flip off, because, I know I'm good enough. I know what I'm capable of. And I didn't have the expectation in my head. I always had the expectation that I was going to be more than anyone ever dreamt.
And yes, I think for me, I always had that. But I think, the biggest part for me was the personal, intimate relationships that I would get in. Because a lot of my abandonment issues would surface, my abandonment issues from childhood. And then when I would get in relationships. And so, yeah, for me, I've always had this motivation to do whatever I'm going to set forth, right? Like as I was a teenager, I was like, I'm going to live in California. I'm going to specifically live in San Diego. Here I am. That's what I've done. I'm like, I'm going to have something published. I didn't know it was going to be a book. But yes, everything that I do, that I want to do, I'm able to do. Not saying that it's easy, but that is different than the not being good enough, like in relationships, like in intimate relationships.
Mm-hmm.
But that thought, again, affected areas of my life, right? And so it's just really figuring out like, what is that message? And I talk a ton about the stories that we tell ourselves and cognitive restructuring and how do we change that thought, because 99.9% of the things that we tell ourselves are from us, right? Which shapes our behaviors, right? So if, as I was in this car accident 2 weeks ago and I've been in a ton of pain. And if I'm like, oh, this is never going to get better, like this is it, blah, 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 my behavior would have been to stay in bed for the last 2 weeks, right? But I have to like reprogram that brain, even though I'm in immense pain, to say, no, this is just today, right? Like I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And so it's really diving deep to rediscover who you are. I talk a lot about that in my book, because anytime we go through something that's life-changing, whether it be a career, health, relationships, we have to go through that rediscovery process because we change. So that means our values and the things that we think about ourselves change. So it's really, really getting comfortable with yourself and unapologetically owning who you are and doing that difficult work.
Yeah, you're a cognitive behavioral therapist.
Oh, yes.
And it shows.
100%.
And it shows.
100%, yes.
I am too, basically. So
yeah.
But, I understand explicitly how and what your thinking process is on this. So, but can you tell us a little bit about your movement that you're doing with the I'm Good Enough? Because I really want people to hear that.
Yes, which is definitely based on a CBT, cognitive behavioral skill pattern called grounding. So yes, so once the book came out, I had to really learn to be comfortable with being vulnerable. And, those authenticity and vulnerability and integrity, those are like my top values that I rediscovered when I was going through my trauma work. So I wanted to give back after the book, because that was a huge thing for me to start telling my story all over the world and all of that. And so about 6 months ago, I was like, okay, what else can I do to give back? And I teach a lot about, with my patients and my coaching clients, visual coping skills, which is a CBT skill, and how this goes into the cognitive restructuring, retraining your brain. So I created these cards and it just says on the front, I am enough. And then on the back, it has the word because with 3 lines. And People can order these cards. They're absolutely free. And what I tell people is to write why they believe that they're enough, even if they can't think of anything, right? I'm enough because I got out of bed this morning, right? Like starting somewhere, and then read that card over and over and over again when you find yourself saying something negative to yourself. Because what happens is with visual coping skills, when we see something and reread it over and over again, it's going to distract our mind from the negative, right? And focus on what we're reading. So people can order these cards. You get 5 of them for free. I launched it 6 months ago, and cards have been sent to 25 states and 12 countries, meaning that I didn't just send them to people that I know. It means that people organically have heard about the movement and have gone to the website, have placed their order. I have people ordering them for kids, for their families, other therapists order them for their clients, schools. I mean, anything. I've got one lady that literally orders them and she gives them out to homeless people. And it's just a way to give back. You know, my passion and my purpose is to empower everyone to believe that they're enough. So it's pretty awesome. I was actually just yesterday, I was on one of the San Diego news stations. So I do a lot of news, TV, radio, sharing the movement. It just became a nonprofit last week. So I'm super, super excited about that. So yeah, it's just, you know, we have shirts and people will send me selfies of them holding the I Am Enough card. And then they get their own day on Instagram, you know, just showing the world and more importantly, themselves that they are enough. So it's really exciting.
Yeah. And it's, you know, you can't place enough value on having people believe that they're enough, because just that simple belief that you're enough can do immense things in your life. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the things I do is I start to have my clients make their bed in the morning with the first thing that they do when they get up. Yeah. So if you can't find something to think you're good enough about, you can say, I am good enough because I made my bed first thing.
I heard that when I was active duty. It was commencement speech that someone...
University of Texas.
Yes. And it was an admiral, right? That said that. And so I use it all the time too with my patients. It's so funny.
I heard it way, way, way before that.
You did? Okay.
Yeah. You know, well, in the Marine Corps, I mean, because we had all kinds of different people come into the Marine Corps in boot camp. A lot of guys don't know how to make a bed and don't know how to make it tight. You know, I can tell you this as a truth. I have made my bed every single day since July 21st, 1965.
Yeah.
The day that I went to boot camp at Parris Island, South Carolina. It gives you a feeling of accomplishment the first thing in the morning, but it builds discipline. It builds this discipline in you that I cannot get up out of a bed and not make it.
Right.
It can present a problem when you're married and your wife's still in the bed. But you know, I mean, my late wife used to think that I was OCD because I had to get up out of the minute I get up out of the bed, it's got to be made. But there's a lot of benefits to it. So, you know, I encourage people to start that behavior.
Don't know which direction you want your life to take? Are you sinking deep down into the pit of uncertainties day by day? So, what's the secret to leading a happy, satisfied life? It's taking matters into your own hands. But what if the matters in question are a total blur? Art Costello's Expectation Academy course aims to tell you exactly how you can get some clarity in your life. This course can be your savior on your journey to reinventing yourself. While you certainly can't plan your whole future ahead, you can definitely control twists and turns your life takes. So what are you waiting for? Sign up for this course now at expectationacademy.com. Get a chance to broaden your horizons and add meaning to your life. That's expectationacademy.com. You
have 5 steps to your program. Can you briefly tell us about them? You don't even have to do it briefly. Can you tell us about them?
It's fine. I never thought that, I mean, these 5 steps, I really didn't know if I was going to use them with my coaching clients and with my mental health patients, but I actually end up using them a lot. because these 5 steps that I developed were steps that I went through while I was going through my own trauma work. And so that my book was written in 5 months. So February 2018 until May 2018, the exact same time that I was doing my trauma work. So it's all heart and soul, that book. And it's my saving grace because that was what got me through it. So those steps were steps that I was actually going through while I was writing the book. So the first step is, and what I should say too, is what I like about the book is that, we've all read self-help books, right? And, I've done underlining and then like written in the margins and all that stuff. And then I like put it in my dresser or my bookshelf and don't look at it again. What I wanted this book to be was for people to actually start doing the work on themselves, because the I'm not good enough mindset is such a worldwide epidemic. It's crazy. So I pose questions at the end of each chapter with places to journal so that people can actually start doing this work. So the first step is discovering your true self, which is what I had talked about earlier. It's the first step that you have to do. Like that's the deep dive. It's learning the radical acceptance. It's redefining your values and who you are now because of what you've gone through. So there's some questions in there to kind of help get you thinking about who you are today and really kind of closing that door of who you were before this, whatever happened to you. And once you start working through rediscovering yourself, you're able to start visualizing this life that maybe you never thought of. So for me, I was rediscovering myself. And then all of a sudden I started visualizing like, well, I guess I have a story. Like I can see myself on stages. I can see myself not working full-time at a hospital for someone else, but working full-time for myself and being in control of my schedule and still being able to give back. So that for me was like so exciting, because I guarantee you if I was married or hadn't or still been at the hospital and hadn't done my work, my trauma work, I would just probably just be doing the same old mediocre thing, right? And so for me, I wanted more. And that first step led me into step 2, which is visualizing your passion and purpose. So I give you some visual tools and exercises to do to start that process. And then, of course, step 3 is grounding yourself, which is a CBT thing. So I love this chapter because we all use grounding skills and we might not even think about it. So it's all about physical and mental and soothing grounding skills. So like you've now kind of rediscovered who you are and you're starting to visualize this life, but those negative thoughts still come in, right? Like maybe it's the superhero mindset or the I'm not good enough mindset or the waiting to be happy mindset, right? There's all these different types of mindsets that we struggle with. How do we ground that? How do we ground those thoughts so that we can continue to push forward and create the life that we want without having those negative thoughts keep us stuck? So I give you tons of tools and all of that stuff for that. And then step 4 is creating your strength plan. So for therapists, we have treatment plans, right? Well, this is kind of like a treatment plan, but it's a strength plan. So it includes all of your self-care, all of time management. So like, hours you have to work, family stuff, dinner, when are you going to eat, lunch, dinner, breakfast, when are you going to do your self-care, all of the things that you need to have as a plan to be able to continue creating this life for yourself. And then step 5 is strengthening your healthy habits. So this really talks about complacency, where when life starts going good, right, we stop doing maybe our self-care or our grounding skills, whether that be meditation, gratitude list, breathing, our therapeutic breathing, whatever, because life is going good, right? And we're like, okay, we got this. It's good. But then something else happens, right? Because it's life. Life is crazy. We find ourselves falling apart and maybe getting stuck again. And so step 5 really talks about how to avoid complacency. And it talks about accountability, finding your, what I love to call strength tribe. Who is that? Who are those people that are going to keep you accountable? Good, bad, and ugly, keeping you accountable with stuff. So those are the 5 steps. And I always like to tell people too, is just because you get through the 5 doesn't mean that you're not going to find yourself back in 1 again or 2 again or 3, whatever, because life is always changing. So those are the steps, just a brief overview, but it's pretty exciting. I love watching patients go through this, because the first step, 9 times out of 10, they'll come back to me and they're like, I'm not ready for this. And I had a lot of friends that read my book when it came out, and they were like, whoa, Megan, I am not ready to do step 1. And I'm like, that's okay. It's totally okay. It's hard work. It's hard work to actually get inside your brain and figure all this crap out that we have. But when people do take that first step, I mean, the transformations that I have seen have just been phenomenal, and it's so exciting.
Yeah. You know as well as I do that we have a lot of clients, patients, whatever you want to call them, come to us and say, I want you to fix me.
Mm-hmm.
What I love about what you're doing is you're making them do the work to fix themselves. And that is so important, because, you know, one of my big identifying things with people that I work with is I ask the question, do you expect me to fix you, or do you expect you to fix you?
Mm-hmm.
Because if they tell me they expect me to fix them, I tell them they can't. You know, the only person that can ever fix you is yourself.
Yep.
Because you're you. And our experiences are so different. Let me ask you this question. What role do you think expectations play in any of your...
I like this question. I've never been asked this question, actually. I love it when I get new questions.
Well, my expertise is in expectations.
Yeah.
So
I think, you know, expectations from others keep us stuck a lot, you know, because I think it was funny that you had just said the part where, you know, you are encouraging others to do their own work, right? Because the word that came up for me was codependency, right? Because I think as therapists, we struggle with that sometimes. Like, are we being too codependent? Like, are we helping them too much? And so I think that codependency part also falls in with expectations from others, right? So if we're trying to live up to everyone else's expectations, we are falling short of taking care of us first, right?
Yeah.
So I really think expectations from others can keep us stuck or really in that negative mindset. Expectations from ourselves, I think for me, and I see it both ways, because I have clients that have great expectations. They don't know how to get to that point, right? But I know for me, my expectations for myself are motivating for me, right? So,
that's because you've learned to manage your expectations.
Exactly. Yes.
And that's what I teach. I teach people how to manage their expectations, because, as I said before, we see them in 2 lenses, either faith or fear. It either stops us or starts us. You know, and everything stops or starts with an expectation. I always challenge people, tell me one thing you do that is not based on an expectation. We do not take any moves or make any moves without expecting. And I don't care if it's breathing, because what I do with people who say, I don't have expectations, I'll tell them, take your right hand and put it over your nose, take your left hand and put it over your mouth and clamp down. They say, I can't do that. And I say, why? Well, I can't breathe. You have an expectation to breathe. It's as basic as that. And when people learn how to manage them, it really, really makes a huge difference in their lives. And I happen to agree with you. Don't live to your expectations, not to the expectations. You give all your power away as a human being when you live to the expectations of other people. You will never find happiness.
Exactly right. Yes.
There's my speech.
Yay. I love it. I love it. I love it.
So we're heading towards our last 5 or 10 minutes together. And I hate to say that that's true, but we are, because I really enjoy our conversation.
I
think
know.
it's really good. But I want to give people the opportunity to hear any of your last thoughts, and then where they can get a hold of you, what you have coming up, what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then we'll close it out.
Okay. Well,
but I'm going to have you back.
Yes, I would love to.
I want to do this again.
Yes, I'm just starting. I mean, it's like in the early stages, my second book. So it's very early. I don't have a date of when I want it written. You know, now that the movement's isn't the nonprofit, that's really where my focus is. But, you know, for anyone that's interested in reaching out to me, that's what I love. That is why I do what I do. I want to hear your story. I want to be there to support you however I can, because if it's someone that really is struggling with narcissistic abuse or abusive relationship and they want to talk to someone and they feel comfortable talking to me, then that's all I want, if it's that first step. So again, no, I'm not going to make you start working with me or anything like that. I always have to put that out there, because I want to make sure that people are safe and that they're able to start doing the work without having to be afraid of calling someone because they're going to try to trap them into sessions or whatever. Right. So I always like to give that disclaimer, but excited just about the movement. Got a lot of interviews coming up, speaking engagements coming up. If you're interested in ordering the cards, you can either go to two different websites. You can go to my website, which is meganfenyoe.com. On there, you can order the cards. I also have a ton of free downloads on there, the 5-step checklist, which is kind of like a summary of the steps and some grounding skills and all kinds of different stuff that are absolutely free and some video trainings. You can also go to IamEnoughMovement.info. You can also order the cards there. You can see the Instagram page with the selfies. You can order the shirts and a bunch of the other interviews. I am going to be launching I Am Enough TV. So super excited about that. It's going to be available on Roku. And that should actually be launching in the next week or two. And I'm interviewing amazing, inspiring people, mainly women, but we do have a couple guys I'm having on the show, which I'm super excited about. Just talking about, what it means for them to be enough and sharing how they move from their struggles into their strength. So super excited about that. Yeah. And I'm kind of known as the I Am Enough girl. I walk around San Diego with my microphone and my shirt and interview people about what it means for them to be enough, like complete strangers. So you can see those on the website too. It's kind of cool because that for me took some strength there because that was very, very difficult to walk up to random strangers. But it was really cool to see the outcome of what people have been saying. So,
well, that's great that you could overcome that, because that's a fear. I mean, that's a fear of talking to people. So,
yeah.
Well, with that being said, we're going to have to say goodbye, but I want to encourage my audience to reach out to Megan and the work she's doing. And if you're feeling like you really can identify with what she said, I want you to most definitely reach out and touch her. She's got a great heart. She's got a great smile. She's got beautiful blue eyes. So now all the eyes will be calling you. So anyway, she is a super person and she really has your best interest at heart.
Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. Everybody knows where they can get a hold of me. expectationtherapy.com, and I will let Heather White take us out of here.
Thanks for listening to the show. Drop us your comments and questions with what you want answered on the show. You can subscribe on iTunes and Binge Network. You can also get more information on the website, expectationtherapy.com.